Hey, world builders, forgive my green screen abilities. They're not super great. The lighting in this room isn't amazing, to be completely fair to myself at least. But I wanted to welcome you to the first ever full month of Shoutout Saturday. I have combined the last 4 weeks into 1 month. It's well over 20,000 words, I think, of writing from the community in a month's time, which is kind of amazing. I wanted to thank everyone who had something in these Shoutout Saturdays, especially President the Great, who wrote almost every single day for this whole month, I believe. But also just thanks you to everyone else. NYUX, napip, sunpanda, MycoMan, Nugget, and I think a couple others that I might be forgetting. All of the names of everyone will be listed in the comments, and if I forget them now, I do apologize. Carhop. That's one I forgot. Carhop. But please enjoy listening to all this very cool world building. If you want to be in something like this, just come to the Discord. The link is in the description. You can submit your works just for the prompt of the day if you would like. But if you add the tag to the forum for Shoutout Saturday, it'll get included in this. If at some point this gets too big, we'll think about how I can make it more doable. But for now, I'm able to read everything, and that's made me super happy. And I feel like I've actually giving people something worthwhile in that I'm not just trying to summarize something that I didn't myself write. And without further ado, let's get back into it. So for day 124, we had the prompt, what does a typical work week slash month slash day look like for common folk in your world? And MycoMan was the first person to submit, and he submitted jobs on a bullet ship. Jobs on the ship vary quite a bit. Depending on those jobs, you could have all sorts of different scheduling, varying levels of danger, etc. We'll speak on the job of Chrisen, one of my three main protagonists. Chrisen works as part of a security team on the ship. That means for him, he only gets 1 day of work off a week. His 10-hour workdays consist of patrolling the ship, which has teams of 2 or 3 persons moving between different locations on the ship every half hour. They're also in charge of looking into crimes at a deeper level, which is the catalyst of the story from Chrisen's side. Someone on the ship is dead, but when Kristen and his team are sent to investigate, they can tell things aren't right. Then from Predwin the Great, who wrote Life on the Caldathan Front Line, Arthur woke up to the distant sound of artillery in the distance. Whether or not they were on his side didn't matter. He laid his head for just a few minutes more before the bell sounded off for a shift change. A grainy, metallic, and makeshift cowbell sounded off for a minute straight with no rhythm to it. Arthur weighed the pros and cons of getting up on time in his head. Should he miss out on breakfast? It may not even be there. Supplies out here aren't very common, and shipments don't always show up on time. He chose to get up on time. The last thing he needed was Magsen staring him down all day for disobeying protocol. That officer was a real hard ass. Walking out of the muddy, damp barracks, Arthur shielded himself from the light of day, shrouded slightly by the rainstorms in the distance and countless billows of smoke from either Caldathan bunkers or the enemies. Again, it was hard to tell or even guess. Arthur walked down from the hillside, careful not to trip into the barbed wire again. Wounded soldiers aren't often given the chance to recover. Mercy is more common than bandages. He arrived at the galley, if you can call it that. A pot of gruel and 3 seats, 2 of them with broken legs substituted by spent artillery shells, sitting crisscross on the muddy ground was Arthur's best friend, Crunt, a biggin that had made the executive choice that Arthur was nice enough to be pals with. Crunt patted the mud next to him when he saw Arthur. Pulling up the good chair, Arthur served himself a bowl of slop and listened to Crunt as the brute spoke like a toddler about the last wave of foes. Losing himself in thought, Arthur thought back on his home, his mother and brother he left behind when the nets caught him. At least his sacrifice would be food in their bellies. Even better if he died. At least then their family toll would be fulfilled and Sam wouldn't get drafted, as long as the paperwork got processed in time. Crunt gently shoved Arthur, pushing him over in the chair, breaking it against the cauldron full of goo, breaking the backrest. Huh? Arthur groggily queried. Sounds like them greenies are coming, Artie boy. Bell was ringing good just now. Ringing good was Crunt's way of saying that the bell was ringing every other second for 6 seconds or so straight. That meant orcs. Rushing into position, Arthur and Crunt peered across no man's land, past all the barbed wires and landmines. Magsen stood behind everyone, like he always did, peering through a spyglass at the horizon. Arthur stood like a goblin next to Crunt, his heart racing, rifle aimed out across the waist, waiting for Magsen's word to fire. Crunt towered next to him, breathing heavily, not out of fear, but excitement. Creepy bastard. Magsen let out an audible swear, sending a chill down Arthur's spine. He had never, ever heard Magsen swear, not in his 3 weeks stationed here, not even under the officer's breath. Arthur turned back to see Magsen's face twisted in fear. Arthur's heart sank. He turned back out to the danger zone, still waiting. Rest in vengeance, men! Magsen shouted. Grudge and strife, the soldiers, including Arthur, replied in tandem. Hundreds of guns fired without target into no man's land as landmines detonated, and Crunt laughed like a kid on Sovereignty Day. Arthur was in the middle of reloading his rifle as a soldier to his right was bisected by a tank round. Bone shrapnel hit Arthur in his side, but he kept reloading, adrenaline pushing him further. Crunt kept laughing as his machine gun rang out. 8 hours later the gunfire slowed, orcs and clay pots lay strewn across the battleground, and hundreds of Arthur's fellows lay dead beside him in the trenches. Crunt didn't seem bothered. He kept giggling like a psychopath. Arthur stitched himself up and walked to assume his post, looking out just in time to see more orcs. Now, I will do a little side note on this one. Frederick the Great actually did note that he wasn't so sure about writing something in this sort of format, this very narrative format, and I just want to say that he did a pretty great job, actually. I enjoyed reading through the whole thing in full. Hopefully, he didn't mind the voice that I gave to Crunt. Now, day 125. The prompt for this day was, what is an unpopular but highly consumed item in your world, e.g., food items, drink, or tools? Sunpanda, this is the first one for this week that he contributed braesca, which is a mushroom-like substance that, when mixed together with small traces of other ingredients, created a surge of magic in the user's body after ingested. This happens even if the user is naturally incapable of possessing magic, and the side effects are an exponential corruption of the mind and, in extreme cases, a loss of one's soul. It is outlawed and looked down on to use this substance, as it's seen as cowardly, as well as the damaging side effects. Fredwood the Great for day 125 submitted boil beast rations. Boil beasts are a breed of cattle, selectively bred in Kamar to be highly resilient to the effects of both the miasma and local weather surges. The primary use of a boil beast is the harvesting of its boils, which are essentially dense networks of oil that naturally occur within the boil beast's body in large, densely packed tunnels on the creature's back. This, paired with minor miasmic corruption, has made the meat of boil beasts nearly inedible, but enough to dissuade the Chaldathan government from dishing it out to soldiers on the front lines. Soldiers on the front lines despise any form of boiled beast ration. Soups, jerky, steaks, roasts, anything that a cow can be made into, a boiled beast can be too. Soldiers often describe the flesh as tasting like you soaked black licorice in spoiled milk, then rubbed it against horse ass and topped it off with salt that doesn't do anything but make you thirsty. The innate resistance to miasma of the boiled beast rubs off on soldiers, better preserving their body and minds when exposed to smaller amounts of miasma on the battlefield. Boiled beasts also grow and reproduce very quickly, allowing for a constant supply of nutrition to the front lines. On day 126, the prompt was, what are some beauty standards and fashion trends in your world? Nugget specifically has a couple of different projects that they work on, and Petrichor is one of them. I will note which project it is specifically that their submission comes from when I read from them. This one comes from Petrichor. As a whole, Petrichor is inspired by 1790s France with a Gothic Victorian aesthetic, so everything people wear will be vaguely 1790s inspired as well. The members of the second estate wear a lot of fabric to show off how much they can afford. They wear a lot of layers, have very poofy silhouettes, and wear a lot of extravagant makeup. Once again, think French aristocrat. This isn't always the case, however. Ambrosius Lockhart is a well-known nobleman who dresses fairly simply and elegantly, as he's secure enough in his position he doesn't feel the need to prove anything. He doesn't dress to follow a trend, but sort of started one due to influence. Brooches were also popularized because of the Lockharts, and many fashion trends were popularized through other noble families. Clothes enchanted to keep off rain are fairly common, but they're very expensive, and most only have one or two enchanted accessories they wear every day over more functional clothes. The lower class people wear standard rain attire like coats, ponchos, etc., and the wealthy can afford to enchant most of their clothing. Makeup in the third estate is minimal, as many can't afford luxuries, and if they could, they don't want to associate themselves with the aristocracy. Revolutionaries wear symbols of the revolution, such as cockades, and religious people wear the colors associated with their respective gods white, red, black, pale. And my favorite clothing standard in Petrichor, also a byproduct of the rain, is to cover as much of the body as possible. It's less of a trend and more of an unspoken rule or even just common sense with the climate. Regardless of social class, people will often wear tall shoes, gloves, long sleeves, coats, scarves, even collars that go up to their jaw in order to cover up as much as possible. A lot of the time, the head and face are the only thing visible, but even so, some people cover up further. Perwin the Great submitted Carhop curios. The Carhop people of Grala have a rich culture, 8 separate tribes, all with different history and interpretations of it, that have finally reconnected after times of immense turmoil. The Carhop mostly don't rely on typical beauty to attract someone, more reliant on impressing one another with their own skills, which are far more attractive in a nearly inhospitable wasteland full of giant bug monsters. The other Kartov people, though, the Arad, are more commonly named Havanites. The Havanites aren't really a tribe anymore. They've long since abandoned nomadic life, bunkering down in the last city of Grala, Havenhold. The lifestyle here is far more lax compared to that of the Wastes. Many families can afford to have only one or two members working to sustain the rest, creating many house spouses. The relaxed nature of Havenhold, in contrast to literally everywhere else in all of turmoil, has created a culture largely alien to everyone not from the city. Jewelry, dresses, anything you can think of, the Havanites have become covetous of their cosmetics. The most typical cosmetics found in Havenhold are large, looped earrings. These rings are more often than not made of the famed cyconite, which is said to ward off the mutant bugs of Grala, even though said insects never appear near Havenhold in the first place. Anyways, the Havanites are very, very attached to their beauty. The most common form of recreation is simple jewelry shopping with billboards advertising everything from earrings to nose piercings. Havenhold is overtaken with advertising all about beauty. If you don't have an earring or two, you clearly must not be from Havenhold, and therefore are a savage from those wastelands outside the walls. Then in day 127, we had the prompt, what is an animal associated with a celebration in your world? And Predwin the Great was the only one to submit something this day, and it was Deepwalkers. Deepwalkers are ancient, massive crustaceans that appear next to the eastern spans of the Rumexian Ocean. Deepwalkers rarely ever emerge from the depths of the Fathomless, a great rift located in the ocean that has little to no information about it. Rumexians, before the heresy, used to gather in great numbers when one of these gargantuan beasts was found close to the surface, dragged onto land by hundreds of men with harpoons and ballista before gunpowder was popularized in the region. The animal could feed hundreds and made for some of the best cuisine the Rumexians had to offer. The tradition has been completely eradicated as of the 146th year of prosperity. The year Ensman went crazy. Remexia has been too focused on war to celebrate something as useless as food for hundreds of people who could just eat each other instead. It's also likely that Remexia doesn't even have the naval power to capture Deepwater, as all of their warships, all of them, are besieging Kmar's eastern beach. Predwin also decided to add the following. Decided to add a note talking about things I didn't have before the prompt, if the note could fit. Today's prompt has created both Deepwalkers and the Fathomless. There were no submissions for days 128 and 129, and so we will skip to day 130, which the prompt was write about the leader of an organization that is viewed by most outside it as evil or corrupt. Predwin the Great was the first to submit. He submitted Robert Caldethi, King of Caldatha. King Robert Caldethi, the oldest human, by natural means at least, is often seen by outside forces to be among the most tyrannical and hateful of rulers in all of turmoil. Most, if not all, other governments in turmoil are led by a champion of a specific celestial, such as the betrothed or the warlord. Caldatha, however, is an enforced atheistic kingdom governed solely by the Caldethi royal army. Robert is seen by most outside perspectives as a tyrant simply because of the aforementioned law against religion, which only applies to humanity. Remexia, in particular, sees this as a direct affront to most of their ideals. The idea that the other lineages are allowed to worship, while humans cannot, is direct offense to their religious doctrine. There are other laws and doctrines, of course, that offend outsiders, such as some right being given or taken away. For example, a common law in turmoil is the right of free trade, which grants any citizen the right to distribute and sell whatever they want without the need for any permits or license. In Caldatha, as one can assume, has no such freedom of trade. There are dozens of laws in place to monitor and enforce trade restrictions, permits, identification, renewal of license, and taxation. All of these things are alien to other governments, excluding the highly secretive Adamantine court. Inside the borders of Caldatha, the citizens of Robert's kingdom rely on his family's rule and regulations. While Kmar remains heavily monitored and enforced with the propaganda speakers, regular patrols, and curfews, it is still one of the best places to live in turmoil, despite the three-way war on its shores. Caldathans, although likely through regular propaganda grants, have grown to love their king, despite their general disdain for nobility. And NYUX submitted the following. Arrow is a human-led rebellion against the Lytian majority population, with them seeking to improve humans to the level of Lytians with both biological and technological enhancements. They constantly run experimentations on Lytians before they run trial runs on humans to ensure the safety of the procedures/technology. The organizations have been operational for approximately 100 years, although few know its exact age due to the mystery of its origins. They exist, fully hidden from the majority of the Lytian population, with only vague rumors around the disappearances. There are three heads of Arrow, also known as the Trinity. Sophus is the lead of the entire organization and overseer of all populations. Anati is the lead of the laboratory branch of Arrow, in charge of overseeing and performing the biological experimentations and procedures. Takeo is the leader of the technology branch of Arrow, overseeing and running the mechanics of the operation. Sophus, little is known of him, although the story of his existence is spread widely of the organization. His propaganda story, that very few know as propaganda, is developed to make him and his organization more sympathetic to those within it. The story is, he was born into a poor human family, working within the mines as slaves. His family were murdered because they weren't hard enough workers, leading him to have worked by himself. He finally had enough and ran away from the mines and started Arrow as a refuge for humans under Lytian's control. His exact origins are still unknown, but the few that know that this story is entirely false. The most common theory is that he was the one to murder his uptown parents due to his severe god complex. He was the one to push for the creation of Project Atom, aka the project meant to make man gods. He doesn't care for the cause that he has built the organization around, he just cares for elevating himself to godhood. He values the life of others very little, but he doesn't view himself as evil. He views himself as a being beyond all mortals, with little regard of them and their concepts. With how much he has modified himself, he has to lie about being a human. This can be seen from the corruption on his body, mostly visible on his left eye, which he covers. The corruption has begun affecting him mentally, with his emotions and pain receptors being numbed, causing his severe god complex to worsen. Although he is fully in control, he has become increasingly brutal, with him butchering one of his commanding members for insubordination and then covering it up. Then from Nugget, and this one is in Nugget's project Time Traveler and the Immortal. Stella is the queen of the gods and the goddess of the stars and creation. She is one of three primordial gods, the other two being chaos and time. She values perfection in all things and strives to make all of her creations completely perfect and without flaws. Her favorite creations were humans and the sun, until chaos gave humans free will. No longer seeing humans as perfect due to chaos corrupting them, she tricked chaos into attacking time, as she knew time held power over him. To her surprise, time let himself get killed by chaos, although not before containing him. After that, she took full power as the queen and continued her goal of perfection. She created the gods out of human souls, hoping to pick the most perfect out of humanity to take the role, and removing most of their identity just in case. However, the funny thing about perfection is that it's an impossible task. The gods, still having previously been human, still had free will and free thought, and as such would always become flawed eventually. The gods live in fear of her, and they all feel the weight of her need for perfection at all times, though most likely just get used to it. She grew paranoid, fearing her creations would turn against her. She created Aurelius out of her own blood, hoping a being created directly from her would finally be perfect. But he wasn't. He had to be put in a human womb to finish growing, and in doing so, he too became human. Her mistreatment of the failure Aurelius was the last straw. The gods became split. Those who were still loyal to their queen versus those who were tired of her constant need for perfection that will never exist. As gods began to go missing and later show up dead, many started to blame Stella, as who else has the power to kill a god? Finally, on day 131, we had the prompt, what are some rules/restrictions for carrying or owning weaponry in your world? And Predwin the Great was the final and only submission for this Shoutout Saturday, and he wrote, The Civil Carry Act of Caldatha. The CCAC, as we will call it for the remainder of this documentation, is a law introduced in the third year of sovereignty that regulates the types of firearms and weaponry civilians of Caldatha are permitted to carry, concealed or not, on their person. Most knives and bludgeons are fully within the rights of a civilian to possess and brandish on the streets. Firearms, however, have some choice rules to ensure that violence among civilians is kept to a minimum. The rules made with the CCAC's creation were very minimal, in an effort to encourage civilians to arm themselves for the alleged imminent arrival of Remexia. Early on, civilians were well within their rights to openly carry Armalite rifles and other automatic weapons as long as their weapons were properly registered with the nearest civil center's civil militia monitoring officer. In the ninth year of sovereignty, 4 years after the God Purge, one of the states of Caldatha, Morguldat, split down the middle in a brutal civil war. Caldathan military contained the war and ended it 1 year to the day after the civil war began, but not without new restrictions. Civilians no longer are allowed to carry any form of automatic weapon or shotgun and are restricted to semi-automatic pistols, revolvers, or bolt-action rifles. Officers of the law are allowed the use of automatic submachine guns in an effort to push the respect of the law upon civilians. Each state also contains one regiment of civil enforcers, soldiers hardened by the war, sent back home after earning their stripes to work in a mix of military duty and progressively more and more civilian duty, helping to speed along the adjustment from war zones to picket fences. Although most of these civil enforcers choose to continue working as glorified cops instead of returning to their families. On day 130, we had the prompt, write about the leader of an organization that is viewed by most outside it as evil or corrupt. This is technically a late prompt. Day 130 was part of last week, but Napip posted this within this week, and so I'm going to honor that, and we will read it this time. Napip writes, The Dismissal. On the continent of Valnad, the ages are divided into two great epochs, the time before the dismissal and the 6 centuries that have passed since. Before the dismissal, the continent was a richer place, a world not of separate peoples, but of neighbors. Upon sun-drenched plazas of Karansite, one would witness elves teaching poetry to human children, with their commanding yet gentle presence. In the libraries of Harbikutla, gnomish academies would not solely inhabit the shelves, they would encompass the halls, debating philosophy and logic late into the night with dragonborn academics. Long before the white domes of the Caliphate of Sakhif shined bright, it was common to see dwarven engineers working jovially to the hum of modern tunes, hammers sweat-beaded and coveralls oil-grimed, alongside their tiefling and orc colleagues. Back when the Grist Republic was solely vast untamed steeps, highlands, and deserts, the arrival of a halfling merchant caravan was cause for celebration in any settlement. Their stories are valuable as their wares. The peoples of the Valnad intertwined. They were family, vast and diverse, woven together into the very fabric of each nation. A golden age had arrived under the watchful eye of the chroniclers. 7 talented individuals ordained with the memories and gifts of previous beholders. A child born upon the soil of Valnad, in any nation, of any race or origin, could become the next chronicler if the conditions are correct. A human from the windswept steppes of Grist can be found to be the next chronicler of logic, serving alongside a pre-existing elf from a Karansite. This divine lottery provided a constant flow of new ideas and bound the nations in a shared reverence. When a chronicler died, all of Valnad mourned, but also celebrated the renewal. A new chronicler was destined to be born, and the baby boom then followed across all nations ensured a vibrant future. The cycle had a tragic flaw. Time. The first tremor was felt when a dwarven chronicler of ethics, Curtin Felithorn, a grand jurist from Sakith, held his position for over 300 years. His wisdom was undeniable. He had attracted many followers, like many other chroniclers had done, but his reign created a gravitational pull. Ambitious dwarven clans from across the continent migrated to Sakith, seeking to serve a leader whose influence was a constant. The nation's bureaucracy became dominated by dwarven thought, their meticulousness a boon, but their permanence had hindered the diversity of thought and theory. Then came Emerald Doa, an elven chronicler of aesthetics from the kingdom of Karansite. She was a muse, a sword dancer, and a poet whose art defined an era that lasted 700 years. Under her timeless guidance, Karansite became the undisputed heart of all culture. Elves from the far reaches of Grist and Harbekutla felt the pull, leaving their homes to be near the eternal wellspring of their craft. The system began to break. These long loved and long lived chroniclers were becoming anchors of development rather than seeds. The seats of power, once a dynamic lottery, were now often held by a singular, longevous individual for centuries. The short lived races, the humans, Aarakocras, Dragonborns, and Orcs, had opportunities for their sparks of inspiration. Their own chroniclers were unable to create mites and legacies as profoundly viewed in their short time. A tiefling general from Harbikutla might rise to be a chronicler, but their 80-year lifespan was a mere spark compared to Amaril's fiery reign. Resentment, once a whispered poison, began to seep into the foundations of their diverse societies. A human artist in Karansite could never hope to achieve the status of an elf who had studied at Amaril's feet for a century. A tiefling engineer in Sakif felt their ambitions curbed by the unmoving mountains of the dwarven guilds. The problem was not one of race, but of math. A fatal imbalance in the divine cycle was threatened to tear their multicultural world apart. The crisis came to a head at the Grand Council called by the leader chronicler, Aethys Bloon, a dragonborn of incredible foresight from the Republic of Grist. It was not a council of war, but of despair. King Theron Callistus of Karansite sat beside the Caliph Sri II of Sakif and the bureaucratic heads of Harbikutla. They did not see enemies, but neighbors on the brink of a civil war born from a broken system. The solution they reached was not an act of malice, it was an agonizing decision, tearing apart to save the whole. It was a decision that had to be made to prevent future imbalance and conflict, to restore the cycle of renewal. The long-lived races, the elves, the dwarves, the gnomes, and their kin had to leave. They had to relinquish their claim to Valnad. Their lineage, their future, their next of kin could no longer have the birthright of Valnad, the opportunity to be the next chronicler. The Grand Council called it the dismissal. Heartbreak occurred across all lands, felt and seen in every city. A sight of human children weeping, seeing their elven friends, classmates, and tutors abandoning villas their families had known for millennia. It was the final wrung-out clang of metal as bronzed hammers struck the nails, sealed the dwarven workshop. Tear-stricken orc and tiefling apprentices watched on as their masters and mentors departed. The once jovial gnomish libraries of Harbikutla were profoundly silent. Their dragonborn colleagues would forever miss their thrilling debates. It was a great, sorrowful exodus that tore friendships apart and left a wound in the heart of every community, bleeding Valnad of some of its brightest souls. 600 years later, the continent lives on. The nations are as diverse as ever, populated now only by the short lived races who remain. The seven sided star only appears on their children. The cycle is restored, but the world is haunted by the ghosts of the peoples they lost. In the grand plazas of Karansite, they still sing the songs of Amaril, and in engineering colleges of Sakif, they study the works of the dwarven engineers. They live in a world forever marked by a decision to prevent a war that never happened. Great stuff from Napip, actually. I really do enjoy addressing in fantasy, high fantasy, especially fiction, this idea of very variable time frames in which different species and culture groups live. I think this is a fun way to go about doing it. All right, we'll move on to day 133, the first actual day of this week. And the prompt for day 133 was, what place does martial arts hold in your world? Is it a way of life, a relic of the past, or a hobby taken lightly? Predwin the Great once again wrote, I believe, every day this week, and he wrote for day 133, one man to break an army. The jungle lay burning in purple flame, the miasma overtaking it. Yet still, Regadamello walked forward, rolling his shoulders as he tightened the wraps around his fists. Behind him, 30 or so Murracanians lay sizzling with blackened flesh, burned by Regadamello's fists of fire. Marching forward through the foliage, unhindered, Regadamello hears the man-things in the west, their machines of war engaged in a tussle over the horizon, but his help is needed elsewhere. He carried onward, finding himself looking over a large clearing. Fire raged, and his kin lay dead, surrounded by at least thrice their number in orcs and daemon pots. Good. There were some of those purple bastards, too, Murracanians. They stopped getting back up as much lately. Good. Another week of travel, and he'd arrived in the outskirts of Ud, the only lizard folk city left standing after the man-thing's misunderstanding. Ud is a mighty city built against a mountain, made of stone. A pointy, gargantuan ziggurat, still holding its own as the hell-sent besiege its walls. Good. Regadamello identified the main target. A daemon, a big one. Medieval, perhaps. He trudged forward, tightening his knuckles in anticipation. Daemons turned to him as he approached, and daemons fell as he arrived, his fist cracking their visages, sending them back to whence they came. The big daemon, a wolf one. What did the man-things call them? A reveler. Fun to fight. Anyway, the reveler turned to Regadamello, looking down on him from atop a mountain of lizard-men carcasses, and let loose a smile, an invitation among daemons when they see something strong they want to kill. Regadamello had received this courtesy many, many times. Fought his way towards the wolf fiend, punching, slashing, crushing every footman that dared to impede him. All the while the daemon taunted him, saying things in the Othrium tongue, things that Regadamello didn't bother to try understanding. Eventually, after getting his hands covered in dust, Regadamello stood before the reveler, a medieval daemon, a strong daemon that would take the combined efforts of a dozens of soldiers to banish. The beast smiles down at Regadamello, towering over him, at least 13 feet or more. Heed me, mortal. I am Kelsh. Regadamello leapt up and plunged his bald fist into the daemon's eye. The daemon wailed as Regadamello ripped out a chunk of the daemon's gray matter. Gently falling to the ground, Regadamello let the brain bits fall onto the floor of corpses as the daemon fell to its knees. Looking very irritated, now at eye level to Regadamello, the daemon reached for its greatsword. Regadamello kicked it out of the daemon's grasp and grabbed it by the head, his fists heating up. With a heave, the daemon's head came from its shoulders. Raising it above the crowd, Regadamello howled his victory over the daemons. Hundreds of them were banished on the spot. Only the strongest of them remained. Good. This will be fun. Great stuff, as always, from Predwin the Great. I think he actually has a pretty solid knack for writing narrative stuff. I enjoy reading it quite a bit. Moving on to day 134, the prompt was, what are some omens of ill fortune in your world? Are they commonly held, more esoteric, or incredibly niche? Predwin the Great wrote Vestiges of Doom. For every major shift in the tides of battle, for every ill appearance, something else comes with it. A moon. At a time, the skies of turmoil were clear, bearing the axe head, and for the most part, the events of the world were mild. One dark day, an entire civilization, in desperation to rid themselves of their turmoil, made a pact. A pact with a monstrosity, a king of corruption, the writhing mountain. On that day, the skies wept for 3 months straight. Livestock fell ill, cities drowned, and people lost themselves to the darkness. And when that rain cleared, when the people thought it was finally over, something new floated in the sky. A moon. A disturbing golden sphere, cities of gold over its surface, pristine yet abandoned. When the people of turmoil looked upon it, they knew its name, for it told them. Peleus, the first moon. Centuries later, another appeared. The sky ran red, the deep hue of blood, for weeks. Every day, liquid in the sky pooled into an inky blot of crimson. 7 days later, it became unmistakable as yet another moon. It, too, told mortal kind of its name, Hazak. 3 days after it told others of its moniker, the beaches of Kamar's southern shore were overrun with orcish kind. 3 days after it told others of its moniker, the beaches of Kamar's southern shore were overrun with orcish kind. Well, it has been some time since Azak has appeared. The people of Turmoil live in fear every day that the weather will shift and something new will look down upon them, an omen of destruction. Day 135, the prompt was, write about an individual considered to be one of the smartest people in your world. Are they actually? Predwin the Great wrote, Cluthden Stormbeard Durad. Cluthden Stormbeard is considered by most everyone in Kamar to be the most genius weapons inventor in history. Cluthden's mastery over both the rituals to commune with Ophiax and to persuade it to grant him knowledge, although secret, has yielded great results. Cluthden is the current leader of Clan Drad and has been for around 300 years, although with the escalation of the war and the need for more weapons, Cluthden has been conducting more and more rituals to commune with Ophiax. The soldiers of Caldatha almost all appreciate Cluthden. Without his artillery guns and tanks, the war would be long over, with the corpse of Caldatha rotting. As such, Cluthden's works are a prized possession on the front lines, being reliable and durable weapons where something like the lackey is all too common. Cluthden also introduced the war cry of Caldatha to them, as he wrote those words, rust and vengeance, grudge and strife, on the sides of the Grag Blusim Dal artillery guns he sent to the front lines, creating a rather iconic war cry on accident. While the celestial corruption of Ophiax has begun to claim him, Cluthden is the kind of man that would sacrifice himself to a cause far greater than himself, as he continues now, locked away in his study, innovating, creating, asking. From an outside meta perspective, however, Ophiax is obviously the most intelligent being, the deity of creation and innovation. On day 136, the prompt was, how do people of a culture group honor their ancestors in your world? Predwin the Great wrote, due respect. All across Turmoil, the people have grown successful from their ancestors' sacrifices, from small ways to big. The Kartoff would not have the knowledge to survive if their ancestors had not recorded their gruesome history. The Caldathans would still be under the rule of Remexia if the Pilgrims had not decided to declare sovereignty. The Remexians, even, would all be dead if the Bleak Shore was never discovered. Faith, again, has great power in Turmoil, whether from a religious person or not. The belief people of Turmoil feel in regards to their ancestors has merit in the outside, but how does this belief manifest within the material plane? The Kartoff, who we will be looking into for this document, have several different ways to pay their respects, depending on which tribe you are investigating. Burying the entirety of a deceased tribesman is seen as the highest form of disrespect. A common practice is to keep a bone or two to bring with the tribe as they follow their route through the wastes. The different tribes have ways to incorporate these bones into their everyday life. The Westmakers often put small bones of their ancestors in ceremonial blades, typically encased in amber for the pommel of kopeshes or daggers. These blades are used almost exclusively during festivals of feast, where the Westmaker tribe manages to hunt a castle bug. The tribe leader will use the blade to ceremoniously cut into the castle bug's stomach, making the first incision before the tribesmen finish the process. The tide takers put the bones of their ancient kin into the bow of their war boats, letting their ancestors lead the way across angered waters. The faith that their ancestors will lead them through storms manifests as a glowing light that keeps their course steady through dangerous waters and guides them away from the great monsters that reside in the Hydra lakes. The wardens imbue the bone dust of their ancestors against the prison, a great door said to keep a great horror at bay. The wardens say that the strength of their ancestors keeps the beast of bone imprisoned for the rest of time, but more and more great warriors' bones must be applied to upkeep the door. It's likely that their faith plays a great part in keeping the door shut. I could go on, but I suppose these three shall do for now. Napip wrote, Burial and Ancestral Traditions of the Take, a Warrior Nation. The Eternal Memory. When a Takite passes, the culmination of their life's purpose is honored and remembered in the place that their birthright is forged. At birth, nationals of Take receive a symbolic birthright. Sons receive a 2-pound iron-forged blade, a gift from their local smith shop, their first tool, which is used to instill discipline, vigilance, and national service at a young age. As they mature, this blade can be reforged into a tool more fitting to their chosen discipline, symbolizing adaptability and resilience. Daughters receive a finely crafted fountain pen, a gift from their local college, a device to inspire creativity, aptness to learn, and to communicate and connect with others. Unlike the blade, the pen is never to be altered, symbolizing the pure and constant flow of wisdom. When a Takite passes, their birthright is enshrined in the forges from which they were given. The son's blade, or what it has been forged into, is returned to its hometown's forge. There it is adorned upon the walls, becoming a part of a growing tapestry of iron instruments. As the generations pass, the walls, ceilings, floors, and surfaces of the forge become a living monument encrusted with the contributions of generations, each a piece of story of lives lived and lessons learned. The daughter's first pen is returned to the college that had gifted it. It is reverently placed in a grand hallway, often alongside her classmates, which leads to the college's archives. Here, her individual thoughts and connections were seamlessly woven into the collective knowledge and history of her people. Her pen, a beacon of intellect, forever marked her place within the profound lineage of Takite wisdom, ensuring her legacy flowed onward, ceaseless and true, just like her brothers. Day 137's prompt was, what are the common concerns of the newest generation of adults in your world? Baldwin the Great wrote The Dead Youth. The war is raging. It escalates more and more. No man, no woman has lived past 30 in the last century. From dwarf to furbolg, the young die as such. Young. The toll of war has led countries to lower their recruitment age. At the beginning, for Caldetha, it was 18, then 16, now it's 13. The greatest concern for the newest generation is that they won't be around long enough to start another. And Nugget wrote for day 137 an entry in Petrichor. Ambrosius Lockhart sat in his study gathering notes in preparation for a council meeting later that day. He never particularly liked politics, and, in his defense, he never thought he would need to with two older siblings, but yet, here he was. Siblings and father dead, he was sworn into office on his 18th birthday whilst still in a hospital bed, and he just had to step up and deal with it. That was years ago, and while he still doesn't particularly like it, he has learned how to keep up with the other noblemen. Things were still looking bad, however, for everyone involved. Taxes continued to rise to fill the pockets of the Second Estate, while food and bread became nearly unaffordable for some. With minimal care being put into maintaining the levees, floods in Lower Petrichor are displacing hundreds, while becoming old enough news no one else seems to care. But that wasn't entirely what was concerning him. The Third Estate was angry. They had every right to be, and they're beginning to get violent. Recently, the Council has been worrying about preventing a potential revolt or even revolution, but ultimately, many are too interested in their decadence to care about fixing the root problem. While Ambrosia certainly had a lot of influence, so did everyone else in the council. The only real way to get your desires across was to partake in a game of under-the-table bribes, promises, and betrayals to get other people to at least pretend to be on your side for their benefit. He had influence, but not enough to do anything without putting his dignity on the line. They were mostly just waiting for him to die anyway. With no heirs of his own and his ever-declining health, Ambrose's death was a power vacuum waiting to happen among the aristocracy, and until then, they're being nice for a place in his will. Ambrose leaned against his chair and groaned as his husband Edward walked into the room, setting down a cup of tea on the desk and placing his hand on Ambrose's shoulder. Edward. You all right, Rose? Ambrose placed his own hand over Edward's and squeezed without bothering to open his eyes. Ambrose. Edward, you are a kind and good-hearted soul who sees only the best in people and wants a better world. Don't get into politics. They're gonna eat you alive. And finally, day 138, where the prompt was, what's a creature or monster that is considered dangerous in one place but useful in another? Nugget gave us another entry from Petrichor. While not exactly different place, but rather different time, the undead and the practice of necromancy is highly illegal in Petrichor. It's been this way for centuries, since before even the first floods. It's unknown why the rule is even in place, other than simply the undead are against nature, and that which is resting should stay that way. Not that anyone would remember as much of the old world before the first floods were erased, but during the founding of Petrichor, there was a necromancer who aided in the creation of the city, clearing the dead from the streets and doing tasks humans can't or wouldn't do. While he ultimately died young, likely from side effects of the forbidden craft, his family was given noble status. His secret was buried in the family crypt along with him. Pedwin the Great wrote Greater Ichor Crabs, Beasts of War. In the wastes of Grala, insectoid monsters are a constant threat. Among all of these monsters, one of them stands out as the most dangerous and most numerous threat, not just in Grala, but the whole of Turmoil, Greater Ichor Crabs. Ichor crabs as a species are a problem. They are ambush predators that lurk near water sources, waiting to cull any Carhop that isn't careful enough to quadruple check every step they're about to take. But the elders of the species, the greater ichor crabs, are free-roaming natural disasters. These 40-foot tall, densely armored, psionically adept crustaceans are completely capable of walking headfirst into Kartoff camps, ignoring bullets and spells as they march tent to tent, scooping up the weak and eating them alive as the tribe panics around them. The Carhop have never once killed one of these beasts and treat them as omens of grave fortune, a sign that the tribe is doomed. This is not a mere speculation made by witnessing a towering crab eat a fourth of your number before walking away into the waste, but a fact, a gruesome truth. If a greater ichor crab shows itself, it means only one thing: the wildlife knows where you are. You have been marked for death. Caldatha, in King Robert's wisdom, has seen fit to capture greater ichor crabs alive and deploy them in war. While they pose the same dangers as in Grala, the immense firepower present in the war zone makes greater ichor crabs a very easy target for extermination. Thus far, only 3 ichor crabs have been stolen away to the war front against the Greenskins. These monsters have done an excellent job, wreaking absolute havoc, but in the end, all of them have met their ends to a daemons. But in the end, all of them have met their ends to daemons. Still, Robert plans to instruct the release of 10 ichor crabs upon Remexian shores in a covert operation to force Remexia to retreat and defend their homeland from psychic kaiju. On day 132, we'll go back over the prompt. It was, what animals are used for travel in your world? Are they domesticated or are they forced to be used for transport? Predwin the Great had Houndooms. The Houndoom is a mount employed by the children of Ragash, aka the Muricanians. Houndooms were once completely normal canines, sheepdogs, combat shepherds, labradors, or the odd toy breed. These previously precious pups have been mutated through malicious miasmic malignants, turned into grotesque, huge beasts, barely recognizable for their namesake. Houndooms are rarely ever mounted, typically employed as shock troops, kited by Muricanian vehicles into Caldathan lines as Houndooms are hostile to all, even the children of Ragash. Some aspiring arch-cultists will attempt to force a Houndoom to submit as a steed, a process that includes a lot of bullets and swear words, but if successful, the cultist arises with a new, brutal mount. Houndooms are seen by Murnicanians as adorable, for lack of a better word. The children of Ragash adore the beasts, regardless of if they're being torn apart by one or not. It isn't really a cute factor the Muricanians get from these horrific creatures, more a sense of regality to them, a beast with divine purpose, a heaven sent. The Caldathans obviously do not share this sentiment. As always, he has added the this was a brand new concept from Build Together, with a little parenthetical at the bottom, added the concept of Houndooms as mounts for this prompt. On day 135, we had the prompt write about an individual considered to be one of the smartest people in your world. Are they actually? Nugget wrote for day 135 another entry in the Time Traveler and the Immortal project. Victor Cogwin. Victor is the main protagonist of Time Traveler and the Immortal. Originally from the 1800s, he grew up in the middle of the Industrial Revolution and was fascinated by the inventors of his time, inspiring him to become one himself. He spent much of his childhood taking things apart to see how they work and putting them back together. He is undoubtedly very intelligent. However, it's intelligence put towards science above all else. He denies the existence of magic and the gods, making it very interesting for him when he meets a god in the flesh and has to deal with the implications that everything he thought he knew is wrong. He considers himself a scientist and a genius, a sentiment exclusive to pretty much only him, as most of his inventions and experiments are prone to failure and the gods like to make fun of his scientific outlook on how the world works. He did manage to invent the light bulb, however was never able to patent it before another inventor took credit for it. And of course he infamously invented the time machine out of his watch, and to this day it's his favorite invention, mainly because it's one of the few that actually worked. And now let's get into the prompts of this week. On day 140, the prompt was, what's a piece of mythology that most don't believe in your world? Nugget wrote another entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. Most involving the gods. While most generally know the gods to exist, although dead, many of their myths and stories have been lost. But what about myths that even the gods don't believe? There was something of a rumor amongst the gods about a virgin giving birth to a god. The gods were all once human, before dying and ascending, and they are physically incapable of having children. A god simply being born is foreign to them. A select few knew there was some truth to the whole thing, and that the baby was Aurelius, later known as the Dreaded. But that's yet another myth amongst the gods, one created by terror. As the gods went missing and later killed, none of them quite knew what was happening. Many blamed Stella, but there was always doubt that it was something else, something unknown. Some speculated that the Star Child and the dreaded sunlight were one in the same, but what proof would they have? After all, Stella didn't want anyone to know about her mistake in his creation, and Aurelius knew this. He spent his entire life studying the gods, whereas they knew nothing about him. His prey never stood a chance. And Predwin wrote for day 140, relics left to be found. In the northeastern ruins of the Far Empire, a group of Kartoff believe in a myth like it is fact. The Children of the Far, or simply the Relic Claimers, believe wholeheartedly that the Far left behind all of their technology specifically to be found by the tribe. The relic claimers use a minor psionic power, unique to their bloodline, to locate key relics left behind by the far. This ability alone has yielded splendid results, with several of Havenhold's key weapon exports being direct reverse engineered far weapons, such as the Kofesh IC, named after the blade of the same moniker. The other tribes of Grilla, although grateful for their exploits, see the relic claimers as zealots, devoted to the wrong entity. Those who hear the children of the far speak of their myth are met with an absolute. The relic claimers seem blind to this particular absolute, but those who hear it know. The far would be very, very angry to find the Carhop pillaging their graves. And this submission was actually a new addition to Predwin's world building. Napip's entry for day 140 was Weaver's Gateway upon Sesmere Islands. Sesmere Island is one of the most misunderstood and perplexing locations on Ophalite, a remote island dotted slightly off course from the optimal cargo route from Forvir to Valnad. Its strikingly uniform circular coastline, 60 nautical miles across, should make it trivial to explore. Unfortunately, the island's interior is not so welcoming, a realm of endless twilight and heavy silence. Sesmere's interior is covered by an impossibly thick, ancient canopy that blocks most sunlight. No ordinary life thrives here, only bizarre, glowing plants break the gloomy atmosphere. Reportedly, Admiral and chronicler Marcus Ferreth, well regarded as one of the most diligent cartographers and outdoorsmen in modern times, and his squadron from Sakif, had marched 100 miles or so over the course of a month and had still failed to cross the island. In his briefing, he referred to Sesmere Island as what is known today as the Dark Continent, stating that navigation, both magical and mundane, fails completely within its borders. That is where its story should end, Sesmere Island or the Dark Continent simply being a dot on a wayfarer's globe. But history presents another perspective. Ancient records from the extinct Kraunkon civilization claim they explored and visited the island often, over 6 centuries ago. What they once navigated with ease now repels all modern attempts. Where experienced globetrotters find themselves turned around or hopelessly delirious, the Kraunkon had ventured onwards, possibly returning with arcane knowledge that helped them form their insurmountable empire. Among the many theories about the Dark Continent, one myth is now mostly dismissed, the notion of the Weaver's Gate. This hopeful story claims the Weaver, the cosmic engine of creation itself, left behind pathways to its laborious workshop, a different plane or world, and other planets. Opening these gates lets them join their creator and his guild, exploring the tools and discoveries that aided their sculpting of the universe. The Kraunkon's findings of this gate would very easily explain their rapid advancement and disappearance from this world. The Dark Continent's center could be one of these gateways, or home to a crossroads to other realities, a cosmic power source, or even a way to reshape existence itself. Such immense power could explain the island's strange nature. Regardless, Sesmere Island is an insurmountable trial, and a stroll across its shores is ill-advised. Nice. The Dark Continent for sure gives me Hunter x Hunter vibes. I love these sort of locations that stick out or are completely different from their surroundings and just are super mysterious. Honestly, Napip, I don't remember if you're one of the people that's into Hunter x Hunter in the server, but if you aren't, might want to look into it. On day 141, the prompt was, what's a dangerous or harrowing route that is traveled often in your world? Nugget submitted another entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. Long ago, very long ago, deep in the days of the old religion, when the world was still in the middle of being crafted, fire did not exist. The gods had recently invented snow, however, and while it was beautiful at first and fun to play in, the snow did not stop. Crops stopped growing, and people were beginning to starve and freeze to death. One day, a young man dressed in the warmest attire he had access to, brought all the food he felt he could afford to be taken from the rest of his people, and set out on a perilous journey, unsure if he'd return. He set out deep into the mountains, braving the blizzard, frostbite, and the darkest nights. By the time he reached the top, he was exhausted, having run out of food days ago and the cold reaching his very bones. But he could not rest now, and he's come this far. He approached the altar to the gods, a point in which he hoped he would be heard. He placed a necklace with the emblem of Stella down and began to pray for help, to call off the storm, but was unable to get more than 2 sentences out before collapsing from hypothermia as the snow buried his body even further as he died. He woke up as a god. In response to his prayers, Stella had invented fire and gave the invention to the new god as his new domain. He wasted little time in taking fire to humanity, melting the snow and giving them warmth and light with it. His main temple is on top of the same mountain he died on, and is one of the few that still exists after the war. It isn't the easiest one to get to, after all. Nice piece of little mythology. Feels like mythology. I like it. You've got little details here and there, but then a lot of sort of empty space, which is a very classic example of how mythology tales and oral histories get passed down. Fred the Great wrote for day 141, Hurricane Alley. The Hurricane Alley refers to a large span of ocean between Ormda, Gurla, and Kamar. The waters here are well renowned for their turbulence, sea monsters, and, as one may assume, massive and frequent hurricanes. Although the technology of turmoil has advanced substantially, the dangers of the Hurricane Alley have largely rendered travel through it nearly impossible to the average sailor. The Hurricane Alley is, in fact, not traveled at all by civilians at the moment, for it has been claimed by Remexia, who have locked down the region with their magics. The fate vision of both the scry snipers and the Axions of Remexia have largely nullified the dangers of the Hurricane Alley. Their ability to predict when and where storms will appear and sea monsters will surface has allowed them to claim military superiority over the most dangerous part of Turmoil's waters. While the area is pretty much intraversable for the other factions, so they likely don't care that Remexia has ships guarding it, the Hurricane Alley remains as the fastest non-magical route of travel in Turmoil. On day 142, the prompt was, what is a common injury cure in your world? Does it work well? Predwin the Great wrote auto-stitch circles. Of all the issues Caldatha has to deal with for their defenses, the most prominent problem has to be Kamar's anti-magic field. The whole continent absorbs magic incredibly fast, leading to an immense arcane drought that has, for the most part, been the leading cause of the technological development of the region. Magic is incredibly hard to properly use because of both the arcane sapping and the lack of training. The enemies of Kamar, on the other hand, all come from places where the magic is a well-known and understood source of power. The infantry of both Remexia and the Muricanians are both at least partially fluent in the arcane, as is the nature of their countries. Remexian clerics are able to heal vast numbers of the injured, and Muricanians have a natural ability to regenerate from any injury. This alone has caused great problems for Caldatha and its sister nations. While most magic wears off quickly in Kamar, rune magic and magic circles both generate magic on their own. This has led scholars to develop the most advanced magic circles in the world in order to assist their soldiers in the war to the best of their ability. One such magic circle is the Sholem Largas Proctor Arivus Arcane Circle, but the soldiers call it the Auto Stitch. The Auto Stitch is exactly what it sounds like, a magic circle that seals wounds and stops bleeding. While it doesn't magically create blood out of nowhere like most clerics' spells, the Auto Stitch's capability to instantly close all wounds and mend all broken bones has made for a key resource on the war front. Auto Stitch circles are easy to set up, managed by superheating a giant seal with fire and then stamping it onto a wooden sheet to imprint the circle's design. To activate the circle, one must lay flat on their back and issue the command word, which is usually along the lines of, please heal me, or simply stitch. The man who bartered with Ophiax for the knowledge of the circle, Proctor Avius, has noted that he is very angry at the soldiers of Caldatha not calling the circle by its proper name. The soldiers of Caldatha retort that he can stick it. I do really like Predwin the mixture of grimdark and of comedic elements in your world. There's a lot of fun the sort of dark comedy of people at war, and I think it's well communicated. Nugget wrote for day 142 an entry in Petrichor. While certainly not common, Ambrose, that's how I lost the medical license I never had, Lockhart, had the desperate idea of using necromancy to help cure his disease. He cut out his infected organs to slow the spread and replace them with new ones, using necromancy to control the dying tissue of his body to manually mend his wounds and seamlessly transplant replacement organs. It wasn't a sane idea by any means, and resulted in more harm than good, but if necromancy wasn't illegal, the concept could have probably been used after it was better refined. Lots of fun, like, it's a one paragraph and it's short, but some interesting stuff in there. For day 143, the prompt was, what is a reason why a seeming decent place to settle is uninhabited? NYUX wrote, a major part of the surface area within the faction of Xandra is barren wilderness. There are uninhabitable areas due to the conditions of the terrain such as the dense woods, steep rock faces, and floating islands around the mountains, but there are copious plains and clear woods with infrastructure potential. The majority of these areas have already been used for non-populated produce areas, with them mainly being agricultural areas. The rest, although seemingly normal terrain, have such high concentrations of arcane energy/crystals contaminating the area. Although they are safe to pass through, these high concentrations of energy will start causing mutations within the organisms living in them. These mutations will be mostly dependent on the individual, with only some common traits are observed within the wildlife in these areas. The most major ones are the growth of horns on species that do not normally have them and ones who do, having them grow to unnatural scales and the slow change of developing characteristics for specific elements, in the case of being with an arcane core, the elements being based off their affinities. For day 143, Predwin the Great wrote the mid-ocean span. Between Remexia and Grilla, there are several islands ripe for colonization that lay completely uninhabited. Golgotha, Samsur, Simus, Garlau, Orthia, and Ashkra. These sizable land masses would make for great places to live if not for two massive issues. The islands are both in the area of the Hurricane Alley and Psionic Field of Grilla. These two issues, while leaving the land pristine, have left it completely impossible to build any kind of infrastructure without angering the consciousness of Grilla or risk it being destroyed by a wandering hurricane the size of one of the islands alone. Napip writes the Shalite Sea. The Shalite Sea is an intercontinental sea at the very center of Valnad and its seaway. The very air above the Shalite Sea often shimmers with diffused magical energy, drawn from the depths and dispersed by the winds, leading to breathtaking nighttime displays of auroras and luminous blooms of magic-consuming plankton. Its vast expanse of deep silvery waters accommodate most of the continent's trade. Large, formidable marine vessels, crewed by highly competent deckhands, are needed to cut through the region efficiently. Despite its central location and abundant islands, you won't find any major marinas or shipyards within the Shalite Sea itself. Thousands of years ago, the sea was the epicenter of a great cataclysmic event known as the Celestial Rift. Most of the energy from that event has subsided, yet aftershocks can still be felt in the Shalite Sea and its coasts. The magical residue and its tremors make the sea full of distortions and its islands ever-changing and highly unstable. This instability culminates in the Veiled Gulf, a notorious region where the residual energy of the rift is the most concentrated, manifesting as a perpetual disorienting mist. Within this notorious gulf, islands might appear one day only to vanish, or seemingly appear to be actively moving within the swirling mist. Most attempts at permanent settlement or charting this region are utterly futile. As a direct result of the Shalite Sea's lingering magical essence and unpredictable tremors, the sea, its islands, and its shores harbor no marinas and no nation dares to claim its waterways. Consequently, most of Valnad's great marinas and shipyards are instead located in less logistically optimal but far more stable parts of the seaway, skirting the fringes of the Shalite's untamed heart. Nugget wrote another entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. After the war, the gods' souls were shattered and spread across the world based on where they died. While Moors, and some others most likely, have been trying to find the pieces, most still bleed out, causing strange effects on that around it. Places where the water turned red, like blood, places where the forests almost seem alive, places where gravity seems more like a suggestion, and some where wide open fields of beautiful flowers try and lull you to sleep, where from there you'll be trapped in an eternal nightmare until the pollen leaves your lungs. These places have become increasingly rarer as the gods continue to try and fix the world, but mortals tend to stay away from them until that happens. For day 144, the prompt was, what's a city/town in a unique location in your world? Predwin the Great wrote, Havenhold, last city of Grala, and the heaven-sent plateau. Grala as a whole is covered in a psionic field that seeks out Carhop camps and sends the monsters of the land to slay those who walk the continent's sands. There's only one place this psionic field cannot reach, the heaven-sent plateau. This large, raised flat surface is protected by the powers of Solar, hiding the area from the psychic presence and severing its connection to the monsters of Grilla if they wander too close. At the northern edge of this plateau lies the city of Havenhold, the last city of Grilla. The location of Havenhold seems almost too good to be true. There is edible plant life, drinkable water in the ground, and small rivers and lakes dotting the surface. In stark contrast, the wastes below have no edible plants, nor water that can be ingested, save the waters of the Hydra lakes. Havenhold, by all means, is built on a miracle, a blessed place made of literal divine intervention. Solar herself is the only reason that the plateau is habitable and safe for building, although, with how heavily armed the walls of Grilla are now, it's likely that if Solar were to disappear, the city would still stand. Nugget wrote an entry in Petrichor. Well, it's the namesake of the entire story, the city of Petrichor. Its exact location is unknown, but it's a fairly large city surrounded by mountains, forests, a large body of water falling off a cliff, and is cut off from the rest of the world. The city was built over top of what seems to have once been temples, though are now filled with corpses and hidden from the general public and even most members of the Second and First Estates. The most notable thing about this location, however, isn't the mountains or even the catacombs, but the weather. It's been raining for centuries. The denizens of Petrichor have no recollection of anything other than damp, cold, and wet. They don't know what the sun or the stars are, or even that behind those clouds is a vast blue sky. It's been so long, it doesn't occur to them that there's anything else. The harsh weather makes the entire city a hostile place to live. From the obvious rain and flooding, if you don't have proper shelter, there's also the cold, the humidity, the lack of sunlight. The constant moisture causes a lot of mold, which of itself is harmful to the health of everyone here. Waterborne illnesses and parasites are all too common in Lower Petrichor. The humidity causes lung diseases such as tuberculosis, becomes far more threatening than it should be. And that's only a few of the ill effects caused by the eternal rain. It all begs the question, if it's this miserable of a place to live, why don't they leave? I don't know, Nugget. You tell me, why don't they leave? Maybe we'll figure that out in a future prompt submission. And for day 145, the final prompt of this Shoutout Saturday, the prompt was, what is a common pet showed off as a form of vanity in your world? Frederick the Great wrote scarf skinks. Among the nobility of both Havenhold and Caldatham, scarves are a common piece of attire that has been popularized with the recent boom in cotton production on Kamar. Nobility has grown quite fond of their new fancy adornments, and some among animal breeders saw an opportunity to make a quick buck. Using arcane circles and rigorous experimentation, the perfect shoulder pet was created, the scarf skink. Scarf skinks are 3 to 5 foot long reptiles of the family Cincidae. In other words, skinks that have been heavily mutated through safe arcane circles to be more docile, loving, and long. Scarf skinks have been around for only 2 years, but nobility has snatched them up at every opportunity. The nobles hold the sentiment that scarf skinks invoke imagery of dragons, and dragons invoke images of nobility and power. Thus, owning a scarf skink makes a noble look more, well, noble. As the name and information up to this point may have you guess, scarf skinks are used as living scarves. Their skin is very soft, and the oils on it, as a happy coincidence, add to more supple skin on their owner as they wear the skink. Scarf skinks also possess an ability to change color based on their mood, a trait made by the breeder to help nobles avoid losing a finger if their neck lizard is in a bad mood, but we'll get to that. A neutral skink is usually, colors can sometimes depend on skins, a deep blue color with black squiggles along its back. A happy skink is usually a warm red or orange, and an angry skink usually flashes white and black. So what was that about losing a finger? The breeder of the skinks, a Nyan by the name Bailey Dremblefur, sought fit to make scarf skinks capable of defending their owners. Scarf skinks are capable of launching themselves at the neck of any assailant of their owner using a spring-like motion to fling themselves with 70% accuracy at up to 10 feet away. The bite of a scarf skink is heavily enhanced by more magics present in their creation, being more than capable of ripping their way through mortal full plate. Their body can also, as one may suspect, choke an attacker to death, being able to bend, even break mortal iron, sometimes steel, but that's an extreme case. Noble parents will sometimes give scarf skinks to their ignorant children to teach them about responsibility and to give their child something to do in order to stave off boredom. This has greatly increased the competence of nobles as of late, as scarf skinks pretty much only listen to the one who trains them, forcing noble children who want the skink to listen to them to train it themselves instead of passing it off to a trainer like you would a dog. Finally, as mentioned above, scarf skinks are very passionate animals. They love their owners and will be very sad if they are ever separated. Scarf skinks are also known to break free of their cages and sneak into their owners' beds to cuddle with them throughout the night. Most nobles have given up trying to separate the skink from themselves during the night and simply allow the skink to do as it wishes. After all, who could say no to a dragon? Blue-tongued skink for those who have never seen a skink before. NYUX writes for day 145, Arcane Exotica. Although some species of pets are more rare and more desired, the pets that are the most valuable are the ones with the most refined arcane features, also known as Arcane Exotica. They are creatures that have slowly mutated due to the presence of arcane energy/crystals in the different elements. They often mimic the standard animals, but the mutations get more noticeable with the amount of energy in the element they are exposed to. They begin developing features mimicking the element, very rarely elements, that they've been exposed to, normally over multiple generations. In some rare cases, these creatures will develop the ability to harness and use the elements that they've absorbed, making them rare commodities. The popularity with these creatures has caused an uptick in illegal breeding/experiments on different creatures, trying to speed up the mutation process. If this process isn't done with extreme care, this will cause serious health issues with the animal affected by it. The people buying these illegally created animals are either too poor to buy other types of desired pets or are rich collectors and are just trying to get their hands on the strongest display creatures possible. The illegal breeders often care little of the creature's well-being, only caring for their offspring's quality. The underground market is highly illegal, with it being actively combated into closing, but it is too profitable of an economy to shut down completely. And finally, napip writes paper constructs. Napip, I apologize, I might get some pronunciation wrong here, I'm realizing. Among the studious clusters of high rail and within the bustling, ink-stained offices of merchant and scribes, a particular and interesting companionship has come to prominence, the paper constructs. These small, enchanted creations, often created out of specially treated parchment, soft metals, or malleable clays, have become the cherished companions of desk-bound workers. These aren't the intricate, life-sized automatons that one would find in the cluttered and clamorous workshops of metalsmiths and artificers, or the grandeur and robust clockwork beasts that roam protecting the halls of the royal court. No, these are smaller, far more intimate creations, crafted specifically to show quiet support and a touch of the fantastical to those with mundane workdays. They appear as delicate moths, purring miniature dragons, or even an animate puzzle cube, each meticulously crafted. They can guard one's hoard of stationary materials, prevent an empty ink holder from hindering writing flow, provide a soft, gentle light for late nights, or create a precise beam for tracing straight lines, or mutely listen to one's thoughts as they attempt to work through logistical operations. They demand little, a whispered word of affirmation now and then, perhaps a dusting of charmed glitter for sustenance, or a drop of clean water or oil once a week to maintain their pliability. Their purpose is less about grand utility and more about subtle presence. For day 146, the prompt was, what is a scientific theory about your world its inhabitants currently hold that is completely wrong? Nugget wrote an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. Stella molded the world and the first of humanity out of stardust 6,000 years ago, Emirs explained. Only 6,000, Victor objected. I'd expect it to be several million at least, especially if we're talking about the stars. Million? You wound me, Victor. You really think the gods are that old? Well, no, but the world and the stars are far older than that, according to science and reason. All right, go ahead, Amirs said, sitting down in midair to listen. Tell me, Victor, explain to your god why the world is older than 6,000 years. The floor is yours. What does science say about this? Victor straightened his posture in an attempt to reset and seem more serious than he was as Emrys watched. Well, with science, we can tell that the world is a lot older than 6,000 years. For one thing, there are layers and rock formations that prove this from sedimentary formations, and of course, fossils from creatures long extinct, dating back millions of years. Oh, yeah, I forgot about those, Imris interrupted. So you admit it, Victor said triumphantly. The existence of fossils proves the world is far older than 6,000 years. No, actually, Moores and I had a bet, and I won. What does that have to do with anything? The existence of fossils and dinosaurs, while I'm at it. Those are fake. Those are from a bet. Emrys smiled as she thought about this. Did humans genuinely think those were proof of how old the world is? Well, not me personally, but some well-to-do scientist has. You mean to tell me this scientific discovery was the result of a bet? A bet I made with Moores when I was like 15, correct. Ask him yourself if you don't believe me. I. Victor started, but found himself unable to find anything else to say. Well then. It's the first one I think I've read that was full on just dialogue back and forth, and that was kind of fun. Hopefully, I did the characters justice. Nugget, let me know if the voices seem totally wrong, and also if Emrys is how I'm supposed to pronounce that. Forgive me if that is incorrect, but I did enjoy this. This is fun. Fun, quirky conversation between a mortal and a deity. I like it. For day 146, Predwin the Great wrote Psychweed and its malicious effects. Cannabis cycanus, or enlightener, is a largely illegal commercial drug native to the wilds of Grala, the only place where it is legal, mostly from the fact it is impossible to impose law on the tribes effectively. Enlightener is mostly believed to be in extreme danger, as its history seems to support. The primary use one might find for Enlightener is the immense psionic power that manifests along with its imbibement, which can be used for an innumerable amount of tasks if used properly. When used improperly, however, Enlightener can reveal dangerous absolutes cognito hazards. These malign snippets of information are capable of, without intervention, opening doorways. These rifts lead to the outside, the realm beyond, and if they remain open, something may try to enter them. All this information, up to this point, is completely false. Enlightener is found everywhere. Not just Grala, it is capable of enhancing psionic power, but not to such an extreme that the average, notably untrained person could not possibly expose themselves to an absolute, let alone something so powerful could open a doorway. Those capable of finding an absolute are trained well enough that they can avoid it, should any signs present themselves. On top of this, Commercial use of Enlightener does nothing other than provide calming visions, mostly of loved ones or relaxing spaces, and greatly reduces negative emotion. This idea that Enlightener is a wicked drug has been spread by General Orthus Illerwin, a man with far too much power for such little intellect. Ever since he outlawed war use of Enlightener, casualties have skyrocketed from panic attacks, starvation, and self-sanctioning. There are officers among Illerwin's retinue that question if he is a traitor. Perhaps there is some merit to such a thing. And as always, he noted that this prompt actually changed Psychweed into Enlightener, a little less on the nose. So he altered some of the world building just a little bit thanks to this prompt, which is kind of cool to see. On day 147, the prompt was, does your world have a taxonomy system? Who is responsible for cataloging the creatures in it? Predwin the Great wrote, Sviraktak, markers of beasts. The Khazara, as is their religious code, constantly look for new things to devote their lives to. Some go into sculpting, some into politics, and some come up with fancy names for all the creatures in the world. These markers choose to undertake a task without any real benefit, scientific taxonomy. The markers have regular meetings to discuss any progress made by one another. They catalog each other's names they give to the creatures of the world and mail the information to the Council of Mazdun-Nak, the largest Khazagral city, where the writings are further recorded and put into the archives. The markers sometimes overlap in their work, two or more individuals giving a name to the same animal. In the event of such a thing, the Khazagral come to a democratic vote on which name suits the animal best, then move on. Today's prompt added the concept of markers and the idea that Mazdun-Nak has massive archives. So some more very cool things added, things to build together for Predwin the Great, which I like these notes that he adds. I think that's a cool idea. For day 147, Napip wrote Leto Survey Corps and their bestiary. Amongst the chaotic and unexplored landscapes of Ophalite there exists subculture of adventurers who are not wishing to conquer or collect it, but to true see it. Included in these journeying wanderers is the Leto Survey Corps, 600 personnel and counting, founded by former chronicler of logic Percival Leto. The objective of the Survey Corps is not to dominate the landscapes and uproot specimens into vast archival collections or trophy rooms, but to understand the intricate behavioral patterns and silent laws that govern a creature's day. The society itself is comprised of a ragtag group of the curious and deeply committed, drawing in interim adventurers, tenured academics, retired and current military, and circles of druids, each contributing a unique perspective and a set of skills to understand the untamed worlds. Their bestiary, currently on its 18th volume, is the most extensive and comprehensive compendium of life ever assembled, though not applicably transportable. Ever wonder why Displacer Beast attacks a blink dog on sight, or how Wyver worms always find a way into camp rations, or how the Viven beasts and Raven swamp wasps have a symbiotic relationship? It's all in there. Many thanks to the diligent surveyors. And Napip also started to use this parenthetical to describe what was brand new, and today's prompt added a new Adventurers Guild, which is very cool. On day 148, the prompt was, what leader or person of influence has the most illustrious artistic patronage? What have they commissioned/funded the creation of? Nugget added an entry in Petrichor, Edward Lockhart. Even in the damp and dreary nature of the city he lives in, Edward can only be described as a ray of sunshine. He's a musician and a poet who dreams of a better world and plays in hopes of making people's day just a little bit better than when they met. He's also a mage, specifically a bard, and weaves magic into the songs he sings and the music he plays, causing it to touch the soul in a way few other musicians can. He's generally well liked by anyone who meets him, though is commonly described as having a few screws loose, as what other reason would he have to be as happy as he is? Despite this reputation, however, Edward is actually a rather controversial figure. Those in the aristocracy don't like him because he's from Lower Petrichor and only married into a noble family. He has no wealth, status, or even a name, and spent most of his childhood on the streets. He is seen as filthy and uncouth to those in the aristocracy, and they feel he doesn't deserve the position he's in. At the same time, the Commonwealth see him as a Marie Antoinette figure who married into an already controversial noble family and doesn't use his, admittedly very little, influence to do something to help the Third Estate and only indulging the decadence of his new nobility. He's caught between a rock and a hard place, with one group disliking him for interfering too much and the other for interfering too little, and is seen as a traitor either way. But yet, at the end of the day, Edward still plays his violin and sings as if nothing was wrong, in hopes that someone's day may be a little bit brighter upon hearing his voice. For day 149, the prompt was, what is a member of a military/religious order that is highly feared even within their own faction? Predwin the Great added Scry Snipers. Scry Snipers are, without a doubt, the most dangerous mortal combatant in all of Turmoil. They are all female soldiers, ritually blinded and forced to hear the voice of Rom. They become reliant on this voice, which guides them through everyday life. They wield powerful weapons that they never miss their shot with and never show fear in any circumstances. Those who have borne witness to a scry sniper in the flesh are met with an overwhelming amount of dread, a sense of impending doom every second they remain near the sniper. This aura is so powerful that even Axions, the highest form of military rank within Remexia, rarely ever walk away from a scry sniper without their hands trembling and their foreheads sweating profusely. The fodder of both Remexia and Castellum steer well clear of any of these femme fatales. Male soldiers that are forced into a squad with a scry sniper often come out of duty, if they survive, forever terrified of those of the fairer sex. Female soldiers that operate with scry snipers more often than not are in extreme danger of metaphysical deconstruction if in close radius to the sniper for more than a day. Those who oppose scry snipers, from the moment their ally gets their head blown off from 8 miles away, immediately lose their nerve. Panic spreads very quickly. Soldiers break formation and trample over each other. This fear is infectious. Even those who didn't see the death of their comrade or even hear it will, in unison with their allies, completely lose their will to fight. The only combatants the scry snipers fight that are immune to this effect are the Kazagra, Umberkin, and the Chosen. I really like the ending of this because it gives me an idea of sometimes when you have one side that Redmond writes a lot about that's really, really obviously powerful, it's nice to know, oh, well, there are other groups that are effectively just capable of countering or actually properly fighting back against some of these things. Because on its nose, describing a sniper sounds a bit OP, but then you have, oh, well, there are things that aren't even affected by this fear factor, which is very cool. I like this. Gives me a little bit more context for the world. Nugget writes for day 149, another entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. After the gods drove the world apart, mortals grew to fear all remnants of magic that were spread across the world. From this fear, the Witchfinder army was created, people whose job it was to identify magic and destroy it. While they've mellowed down since the insanity in the 1600s, the practice is still prevalent even if it's taken a more underground form. The Cogwin family have been witchfinders for centuries, and the current time travel, head of the Witchfinder army is Witchfinder General Phineas Cogwin. Phineas takes his job extremely seriously and is known to be very extreme in his hatred of magic. He despises magic with every fiber of his being and will not rest until every drop of magic is destroyed. Of his children, he wanted Victor, his eldest, to take over his position. Victor was trained from an early age to kill those suspected of having magic. Even when it made him sick to his stomach, Phineas would only go harder on Victor until he wouldn't fight back. Victor never liked the work of witchfinders, having magic himself. He doesn't know where it came from, or how to control it, only how to push it down and hide it. After all, he learned early on what happens to people with magic, and anyone who knows Phineas knows family won't be enough to save Victor's life. For day 149, NYUX added Sentry. Every member within Arrow has a rank, this being indicated by their armband color. This rank will determine everything from their clearance level to their accommodations. People below a certain rank cannot even access most of the Arrow facilities. All of the high ranks will have the benefits of the ones below it. Duskling, dark purple. They are the lowest of the low, most often being freshly acquired subjects. Current, dark blue. Often just being cannon fodder, soldiers, or workers who offer no real value to the organization. Wing, black. The base level for all engineers/technicians, with them being able to raise their rank with contributions. They will have access to free food from the cafeteria once a day. Stride, blue. The base level for all field operatives. Their rank will either be stripped down to current or raised depending on their success rate. Solaris, green. The level for most assets who have completed their compliance training. They have access to most facilities if they are accompanied by their handler/guarded. Anchor, cyan. The highest level for engineers/technicians and the second level for field operatives. This rank can be demoted if it is deemed so. They will have access to all organizational Arrow facilities, private living quarters, and 2 food deliveries a day. Beacon, yellow. The highest rank for field operatives. They will have access to most classified information, and the only way for them to be demoted is execution. Sentry, orange. The few assets that have successfully been modified are within this rank. Few have ever seen one, and even fewer live to tell about them. They are constantly in use for either guarded or hit assignments. Each of them have a name within the organization, with there being only 13 of them. Vein, Pylon, Lumen, Hush, Rend, Mire, Flare, Veil, Pulse, Crux, Needle, Crush, and Death. The few people who have started conspiracies about them not being real have been made into examples. None have spread these rumors again. Some of them are used like scare tactics to keep the members of the organization in check, while some have never been revealed to the masses. Trinity, red. The three heads of the organization, Sophus, Anati, and Takeo. Sophus is the leader slash founder of the entire organization and overseer of all operations. Anati is the leader of the laboratory branch of Aero in charge of overseeing and performing the biological experimentations and procedures. Takeo is the lead of the technology branch of Aero, overseeing and running the mechanics of the operation. All three of them share complete control and access throughout the entire organization, but there may be secrets that two of them do not know about the founder. This is a really cool full layout of an organization, NYUX. I like this a lot. Gives me way more context for Arrow, which I think is super cool. For day 150, the prompt was, what relationship do gods or deities have with the mortals that worship them? MycoMan created an entry, would you rather hate your creations or hate yourself? Siltkema, known as the god of scarcity, the god of isolation, the god of nothing. He used to be different, powerful, but not anymore. He's the god who rules over Kragus, an appearance of dark gray stone with cracks appearing around his body here and there. He sits on a throne of his size in the bottom layer. His eyes look dead, like there isn't a soul behind them. What happened to him? I decided to find out the other day. I decided to visit him myself, since I had nothing better to do. I went to Kragus, simply walking my way down a random cave. Once you pass 50 meters below sea level in any cave system, it acts as a direct port to Kragus. As I entered into the dimly lit area, I focused power to my eyes to give myself dark vision. It was an easy decision on where to go. Forward. I soon arrived at a small encampment, known as L1-2. L1 referred to the layer it was on, and it's the second encampment on the list. I'm unsure how they came to decide why this encampment was the second. Maybe it was simply the second one made. Regardless, it isn't time to ask that question now. What it is time for is to figure out how to get to Pike. I found a private area in the camp and focused the weave to the outermost layer of skin, letting myself be visible to mortals. Then I approached the nearest person I saw, a shorter fellow with pointed ears. Hello there, my light-footed friend. Could I ask for directions to Pike? I'm new to this realm. He responded quick, a chipper, nasally voice slightly echoing through the cave. Well, hey there, stranger. New around here, are you? Let me show you the map. He took me over to a board, which I quickly started to copy into my personal atlas. We'll see how accurate their map is another time, I presume. I then thanked the man, as any other person would. Many thanks to you, kind one. I hope the rest of your day goes swimmingly. A slight grin on my face as I left the short one alone. It seemed to be a trip that'd take anyone else a few days. Since I didn't have any limit to my stamina, I should be able to run and make the trip in about a day or so. If anything interesting pops up, I'll be sure to note it down. Note: there's a few pages missing, seemingly ripped out of the notes. Where they are is a mystery only Anorak knows the answer to. I've arrived at Pike. It's a stunning city, truly showing off the grit and grime the common folk here need to deal with in their daily activities just to survive down here. They're wearing interesting arcane devices they call crag packs. I'm sure I'll put an entry about them here sooner or later. Anyway, I went to the bottom of Pike, on the third layer of Kragus. From here I travel to the wilderness and can head down to the fourth layer on foot. I've been debating whether to run to get there fast or to walk to take some field notes along the way. I decided to walk. I found a fungal humanoid species that I can only describe as utterly adorable. They're some of the cutest little things I've ever seen. Something to note is that somehow they can see me, even when I'm not holding my body to the mortal plane. How intriguing. I'll need to revisit them someday. Anyway, past their dwelling space, I found a rather steep path leading to the fourth layer. I do believe it will be fun to slide down. See you all on the other side. Well, what a shame. On the way down, my book scratched against some large rocks and some of the pages were ripped out. I think that the important, or I suppose irrelevant, to use a more accurate term, information is still present. Moving on, though, it's rather bright down here. There are channels of some sort of fluid here. I think the fluid carries electric current. I'm going to follow it and see if it leads me to Seltkema. Well, I followed the river of glowing blue, and I see him. I think he's looking at me, which is odd. Usually nothing can see me unless I wanted to. I began to slowly approach, only moving a few paces closer to this stone giant. He spoke. His voice was dry, tired, dead. Realm Walker, you finally decided to give me a visit, did you? His voice is odd to describe. It sounds like it should be more powerful, more commanding than it sounds now. I nod to him, replying, Indeed so Do not call me that. He cut me off, harshly. I took a step back, which I only noticed after the fact. I simply come to you with a question. I heard a rumor. He stood from his throne, already knowing what I was asking him. I looked up at him, maybe 14, 15 feet in height, his body slender, almost malnourished, but with a stone texture to it. I couldn't tell his species, so maybe he's supposed to look that way? Yes, I'm the god who wishes not to be one, Anorak. You want me to explain why? Is that why you took the time to find me down here, sitting underneath my people? The way he said the last word, I could tell he meant it as an insult. He took a step closer to me, making me have to look up at a harsher angle to hold eye contact. I was supposed to be different. I was made by Nameo and Ernor with the purpose of being the god of excess, the god of gluttony. But when I first came to be, I didn't understand why my life was made for me. Why was my destiny chosen before I even existed? He bends his knees, getting closer to my face, and I nodded, understandably. I get that. But why do you not want to be a god? What about this is uninteresting? I'm forced to look after mortals like a shepherd watches his sheep. They're like livestock to me, Realm Walker. I shouldn't be given that responsibility if I didn't choose it. The gods know not of where you came nor how you got here, but we know this isn't your home. We know that your current life, it wasn't chosen by you, but for you. He began pacing back and forth as he continues to explain his reasoning. This was the most energetic I've heard his voice get. Its register changed. It almost shook the cave we were in. It was full of meaning and truth. I don't know this. I don't want the power, the control, the... He suddenly stopped talking, his face returning to its dour expression. He let out an exasperated sigh. I've tried to leave, to retire, to stop, but I can't. So now and again I send those who remain a challenge. If they surpass, I reward them. If they die, one step closer to my dream. A battle of eternity, them fighting their freedom, me fighting for mine. Silthkama was his name, the god of excess, the god of too much, the god of always wanting more, but that isn't who he is anymore. He goes by Hemak now, but I call him Hem for short. And no matter how things go for him, I hope that he finds something to bring him joy in his endless life. There's a small note in the bottom, scratchily written by handwriting that isn't Anorak's. Silthkama, god of gluttony, is scratched out. Hemek, god of choice. This one's very cool. I think maybe the longest single piece we've had so far, or one of the very long ones. Once again, I hope I've done the devices justice. Let me know, MycoMan, if you have any notes in that regard, but I really did enjoy this piece. I personally want to write more stuff like this, where you get a bit of a journey through a location or a place or a realm from just a first-person perspective of an individual. It could be very useful, I think, to help build out a location in your own mind, as well as, give it to readers. Well done. For day 150, Nugget adds a petrichor entry. There are 4 gods known to exist in petrichor. It's said that they used to be benevolent in nature, but the grief of humanity has warped them and caused them to forget who they once were, and that their tears are responsible for the eternal rain. The Keeper, the white god of secrets and betrayal. The Frenzied, the red god of madness and insanity. The Avarice, the black god of greed and wealth. The Decayed, the pale god of illness and death. They don't have names or faces. They do not talk directly to mortals or even look them in the eye. While some claim to be able to hear or even see the gods, they are never described as speaking. They're more like forces of nature than they are characters. A hurricane doesn't care how much you pray to it, nor does it even know you're there. It's simply a matter of getting out of its way. Many people simply pray to the gods to avoid getting their attention. Keep your head down, avoid angering them, and maybe things will be okay. But there's some who revel in the attention of their gods and mold their entire lives around them, or at least see it as a, if you can't beat them, join them, way of attention. Ambrose's entire family is associated with the Decayed. They've had a blood condition for generations, and it's unknown if the disease came from their worship or if their worship came from their disease. Ambrose had it the worst, being chronically ill his entire life, being told his condition was because of the Decade's love. He lives in constant fear of his god, but cannot say anything otherwise, even when his condition becomes terminal and he feels the mold and rot seep into his bones as his body withers away. It's a sign that he is special, and he's never felt more afraid. Edward was never particularly religious growing up, at least not any more than the average person, but yet the Frenzied loves him. Edward has a strange way of experiencing the world. When he's happy, he's manic. When he's sad, it tears him apart. The Frenzied often plays with Edward's mind and allows him to see through its eyes. His own mind is his undoing, and he's constantly at odds with himself. Things might have been easier if he knew it was because of his undiagnosed bipolar disorder and ADHD, but so long as he's associated with the Frenzied, this will likely never happen. Thalia is from a noble family associated with the Avarice. They care only about wealth and decadence and making themselves seem more important. The Avarice is mostly a god of extremes, a feast one day and famine another, having everything or having nothing. Thalia puts a lot of effort and stress into making sure everything goes perfectly, that her reputation remains clean, and that her family remains powerful. She knows her god well. If she loses a single thing, she will lose everything. Thaddeus was abandoned and betrayed early on. Before his mother abandoned him at the orphanage, he swears she was talking to the keeper itself. Since then, he's continuously been left behind and betrayed by those close to him. So instead, he hurts and betrays people before they get a chance to hurt him. He collects blackmail about the wealthy and uses it to pressure them before going back on his word. His allegiance to the Keeper is one of self preservation. The Keeper will ruin him unless he continues the cycle. Of course, this all assumes the gods even exist. A lot of things about Petrichor are meant to be ambiguous, and the nature of the gods is meant to be up for debate. They certainly could exist, but how tragic would it be if they didn't? All the pain they've gone through and caused, all in the name of the gods that aren't there. Well done, Nugget. I feel like the descriptions of the people who are under the influence of the deities is vague enough that before you even ask the question of whether or not the gods might exist, you already get this feeling of, oh, this could potentially just be the human condition. For day 150, Predwin the Great writes, Communion. The celestials are beings without any form. To speak with one is no easy feat, and can often result in one's demise. Many followers of celestials follow them out of respect. Many celestials care for their followers out of need, for to be a celestial is to starve without the sustenance of faith. Mortal kind does not fear what they rightfully should. For day 151, the prompt was, what's a celebration of national pride for a country in your world? Pedro the Great writes Sovereignty Day. While I've already talked a little about this defunct holiday before, I figure I could talk about what it meant to the denizens of Caldatha, at least when the holiday was still around. Sovereignty Day was held every year for 40 years, after the day the government of Caldatha declared their sovereignty over Remexia. Sovereignty Day was created to celebrate the union of Kamar against the wicked rule of the Seven Saints. Every year, every town's main square was funded with decorations. Street vendors had sales, the children played games, everyone else got the day off from work, other than important jobs like apothecaries and soldiers, at least. Sovereignty Day was by all means a wholesome holiday that unified Kamar year after year. Of course, with the Orc War, the holiday has sadly been put on indefinite hiatus. Nugget writes Starfell, an entry in Time Traveler and the Immortal. The 12 Days of Starfell is the Christmas/Yule equivalent holiday in Time Traveler and the Immortal. It marks the end of the Divine War and the resulting 12 straight days of darkness without the sun nor stars lighting up the sky. From the gods' perspective, this was when Aurelius, as the sun, was near fatally wounded, resulting in him falling from the sky as a falling star, hence Starfell, and later abandoned entirely on Earth. They were at peace, but not for long. For mortals, this marked the day the gods died. They had destroyed the entire world in their war, and now it was over. They were dead. It marks the day humanity decided they did not need the gods anymore. For the next 12 days of pure darkness, mortals found ways to light the world themselves, because they did not need the gods to provide them with light. Celebrations with feasts, festivities, gifts, and games, because the gods were dead and humanity didn't need them anymore. From December 25th to January 6th, the gods mourned the friends and family who died in the war while thanking the stars it was over. Humanity celebrates what they see as their liberation. And on day 152, the final day of this Shoutout Saturday, the prompt was, what group is essential for the upkeep of something very important? Predwin the Great writes, the Custodians. The Custodians are a group of people in Havenhold hired to upkeep and appease the many blank spirit complexes throughout the last city of Grala. The day in the life of the average custodian is rather mundane, although it is absolutely integral to the stability of the city. Each custodian is assigned a certain number of complexes to check in with every couple hours or so. With vehicles making travel easy within the walls, the average custodian is capable of meeting a quota of up to one complex every hour and a half to 2 hours. Rinse and repeat for their 16-hour shift until they get a shift change and the spirits will remain compliant. Each spirit complex must also, every month, be manually checked by a custodian supervisor. This check is in place to monitor the mental stability of the spirits. While elementals have very different emotions to mortals, there are still patterns that can be recognized that can lead to problematic tendencies that must be eliminated. A key trait to watch out for is what can only be described as psychopathic behavior. Supervisor checks ensure that an armed spirit complex, for example a Mark 24 auto bunker, doesn't suddenly decide to kill everything it sees. This has happened in the past. An auto bunker's spirit complex was afflicted with demonic power and mowed down 278 civilians before missiles were deployed in vast enough numbers to bypass the point defense system and destroy the auto bunker. Ever since, the custodians have had a minimum number of workers permitted to be deployed at all times. Finding new custodians is a difficult task, as spirit complexes grow very particular about their custodian handlers. Replacing a worker often causes temper tantrums within spirit complex numbers, and in extreme cases, can cause further casualties if the complex's needs aren't properly maintained. The auto bunkers around the walls may seem unnecessary, seeing as the wildlife doesn't even wander close enough to cause a real threat. However, the auto bunkers are in place not for wildlife but for men. The autobunkers are there to reduce Havenite casualties in the event of an invasion. The autobunkers cannot simply be turned on and off, and so the custodians are ever essential to make sure they remain on the side of Havenhold. This is also very Warhammer inspired, correct, Bretwin? Aren't there basically husks of people in Warhammer who are used as the binds for machines? It sounds like you're saying these are elementals, but the idea is you bind an elemental's brain or spirit into a machine, and that functions as effectively very advanced AI, which super cool. Very cool idea. Nugget writes maintenance in Petrichor, an entry in Petrichor. The eternal rain in Petrichor causes a lot of damage to the city as one might expect. Common jobs essentially just keep up repairs and minimize future damage. People who maintain the levees and arroyos, architects who design architectural to divert water and withstand extreme weather, people who clean up mold and mildew from people's homes, people who work the underground facilities that collect and filter the excess water and provide power. For a biblical flood sent by the gods, humanity found ways to just work around it mostly fine. And the final entry is from Carhop in his world Restris, Exilastus, Soldiers of Sacrifice. While the reign of Ryzen the Mad over the First Kingdom ended centuries ago, his tyrannical hand is still felt through the continent of Liberin to this day. It is not uncommon for the humans living in the remnant of his attempted empire to bear resentment towards their young species' most notorious member. As such, the Council of Mateno governs their city-state in such a way that attempts to repent for the actions of humanity's forefathers and the harm done to Restras and her peoples. While many of the Council's projects and initiatives are public facing and serve the people directly, they retain a few clandestine and dark elements which serve the continent and world in ways just as impactful, but that would be seen as wholly distasteful by the masses. The most prominent of these is the maintaining of the Exilastes, an order of warriors whose sole purpose is to sacrifice their lives in order to safeguard the world from the dispersed firmamental tears. 3 strongholds exist throughout Restras, built in remote and treacherous regions devoid of civilized life. These strongholds are austere, cold buildings constructed of thick stone and barred with lead, featuring square towers, large training yards, and barracks that are more akin to prisons than are proper quarters. This is by design, as most members of the Exilastes are criminals whose lives were forfeit due to the nature of the crimes. These men and women are branded with an X on their right temple and have one of 3 fingers removed based upon the stronghold they are sentenced to live and die in. They are cloaked in funerary robes over suits of chainmail, given sharp black steel, and provided assurance of an afterlife far from the pits of Ganache. Their task is simple, yet unforgivingly lethal. Deep within each of the strongholds lies a lead-lined room containing a singular stone altar upon which a tear-shaped gemstone the color of midnight rests atop a silken cushion. The firmamental tears whisper madness and sing discordant choruses, barely containing the primeval chaos sealed inside them through the death of Ryson the Mad. This chaos seeps out of each gemstone, propagating spore-borne and mutating vermin within the keeps. The only way to maintain the seal upon the tears is through continued mortal death, and so it is that each Exilaste is trained and fed until such a time that they are called by the Lord Ekporal. Footnote 1. The Lord Ekporal is the commander of a keep and oversees all its operations. They are in daily communication with the council, reporting needs and status of their assigned keep and tier. A Lord Ekporal is typically chosen from the Thantian Knights and has his or her nobility restored upon assuming the title, to descend into the chambers and perform their sacrificial duty. Any who attempt to flee are caught by a Thantian knight. Footnote 2. Thantian knights are typically criminal children of wealthy merchants or minor nobilities within Vasilmeno's governance. As a favor to their families, the council places them in these less lethal positions. Their roles of the keep typically include training of the new recruits, overseeing servant staff, and body retrieval when not escorting a reluctant sacrifice. Any who attempt to flee are caught by a Thantian knight and violently escorted to the chamber, whereupon they are killed at the altar as means of completing the ritual. With the seals sated by mortal lifeblood, the gem quiets for a fortnight, just enough time to train another sacrifice. Really great stuff, very evocative imagery. I feel like Carhop has always been good at this. I've read a lot of his stuff in the past, and he's very, very solid at describing these scenarios and in sort of organization environments in a way that I'm not super good at yet. I really like this. And forgive me, Karab, I think I probably pronounced a couple of these incorrectly. If you ever feel like you want to correct me or something might just be hard and you want to help me out, feel free to add that kind of stuff into prompts. But I did my best. I think I got most of them pretty close. Well, there it is. Over an hour and a half of world building read out loud for just a month of writing from a small community on Discord, to be honest. This is only a few people. We would love more contributors. It will make the logistics of these videos harder, but they will still get done. And it would be so awesome to have more worlds represented. For those of you out there who have something that you're making and would like it to be presented or just want to share it, it doesn't have to be in this. Please come join us, hang out with us, chat with us, and share your writing. We love more and more representations of more genres and more ideas. It's been super fun to see everything, and the community has been so cool. It's a small group of people, but it's very cozy, it's very welcoming. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you for watching as always, and have a wonderful day.